My daughter forgot to hang up. I heard her tell my son-in-law, put Dad in a nursing home, sell his house, it's worth about $900,000. The words hit harder than a winter storm. They think I'm a burden. They think I'll surrender. But this old man built that home board by board, and I'm about to turn their plan inside out. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I sat alone in the living room as late light slanted across the oak floor I'd laid with my own hands, a warm sheen that always made the house look like it was quietly breathing. My daughter had forgotten to hang up, and the words she said with my son-in-law had lodged under my ribs like a carpenter's splinter. Burden, nursing home, sell the house. I kept my eyes on the mantel where Ellen's picture sits in a simple silver frame, her smile soft at the corners, the same smile that talked me into adding the bay window even when money was tight. I thought about the ledger of the last 3 decades, not because love needs accounting, but because life always asks for receipts. $60,000 in tuition checks mailed to the bursar across 4 long years, each semester stamped paid with overtime sweat. $20,000 more for a used Civic when Lisa's old clunker coughed its last. $30,000 for the wedding she wanted under twinkle lights and rented chandeliers at the vineyard outside town. I remembered the day I signed the deposit check, Ellen's hand resting on my forearm, as if to say we would make it work the way we always had. Tighten belts, work Saturdays, eat beans and rice, and call it a recipe. After Ellen passed, the house grew quieter but never empty. It held the sound of her in it, the click of her knitting needles, the faint hum she made while measuring out coffee, the way she tapped the window glass when it started to hail. Lisa used to say this place smelled like vanilla and sawdust. I took it as the best compliment a man like me could get. Now my girl, the one whose fever I watched through nights longer than winters, was plotting to trade my life for a down payment. The living room lamp cast a soft circle on the rug Ellen chose when it went on clearance, and I noticed how steady my hands were. Shock had passed through me like a storm line over the plains. What remained was a cold, durable clarity, the kind a man feels when he realizes the only person left to take care of him is himself. The house was never drywall and shingles to me. It was proof that 2 people could bend a small life into something sturdy. Ellen picked paint chips the way some people pick hymns, listening for what felt true, and I swung the hammer. I can still see that spring we mortgaged courage and lumber at the same time. She sketched the bay window on the back of a grocery list and slid it across the kitchen table, a question in pencil. I answered with a miter saw and careful math. I remeasured the angles until my knees barked from crawling the subfloor, then framed the opening while Ellen stood in the yard and called, a little to the left, a little more. Perfect. The crown molding in the living room went up on a Sunday afternoon with a level she insisted we buy, though it cost more than I liked. Straight lines matter, she said, and kissed the sawdust off my cheek. I wired the dimmer switches, rerouted a stubborn section of plumbing, and set each oak plank so the seams ran like lines of a well-kept book. On summer nights, we ate peaches over the sink and let juice run to our wrists. In winter, the furnace rattled like an old man clearing his throat, but the heat came steady and gentle, and Ellen would tuck a quilt around my feet while she read aloud from the paper. That kitchen hosted decades, birthday cakes frosted crooked, science projects that smelled like vinegar, casseroles dropped off by church ladies after funerals. Out back, Ellen coaxed roses from stubborn clay, then planted a maple that grew into a polite umbrella of shade. Lisa took her first wobbly steps from the back stoop to her mother's outstretched hands and didn't fall. When I say the house is worth $900,000, I mean 1,000,000 memories and 1,000 small repairs. The squeaky stair that always tattles, the nick in the banister where a moving box bit clean through the varnish, the door jamb marked with pencil lines as Lisa stretched from grade school to grown. It wasn't only a residence, it was a record of us. Ingratitude seldom arrives with a trumpet. It creeps in wearing good intentions. After the wedding, Lisa and Mark asked to stay just for a few months to save for a down payment, and I nodded, proud to help them start right. The months stretched past the holidays and into tax season. I paid the higher utility bills without comment and slid extra cash into the grocery budget so the fridge could hold their almond milk and his protein shakes next to my eggs and orange juice. I kept a garage drawer empty for Mark's tools that never seemed to leave their packaging, and when his commission checks thinned, I covered an $1,800 credit card balance just this once. Then came the $3,000 transmission on his BMW, which I paid for at the shop while he took a call about a promising lead. When Lisa's marketing job cut her hours, I picked up the tab for their health insurance gap because, as I told her, paperwork is cruel when you're sick. They said thank you, the kind of quick thanks you say at a drive-through window. Sunday afternoons turned into quiet loans that were never called loans. The rent they swore they'd cover as soon as Mark's pipeline closed. The anniversary dinner they insisted on treating me to after I'd handed the waiter my card first. I noticed how often Mark praised me in public. The most generous man in Colorado, he'd say, with a hand on my shoulder at barbecues, while never lifting a dish during cleanup. I noticed Lisa's quick frown when I mentioned the gas bill and how swiftly she smoothed it into a smile. None of it by itself would have bothered me. Families patch each other's roofs in storms. But the requests always bent in one direction, and the gratitude never lingered long enough to warm the room. When their lease expired and they didn't renew, they let my guest room become their storage unit, then their dressing room, then their home base. I told myself it was temporary, the way you tell yourself winter will be short because you saw a robin in January. It wasn't temporary. It was a pattern I didn't want to name. After the phone call, the house felt as if its joists had shifted, like a structure after a hidden tremor. I replayed the conversation the way a carpenter checks a chalk line, again, refusing to believe the measurement I'd just taken of my child. Burden, nursing home. Sell the house. Mark's voice had that breezy managerial tilt he uses when he sends a steak back because it isn't pink enough, a tone that wraps theft in the tissue paper of efficiency. Lisa laughed once, a small, brittle sound I couldn't place inside the girl who used to fall asleep on Ellen's lap during thunderstorms. I walked room to room, touching what my hands remembered, the banister's satin smoothness, the kitchen counter with its slight rise near the seam I'd learned to wipe toward, the dent in the hallway where a dresser got away from me in 2003. I set a mug on the table and realized the coffee had gone cold hours ago. Anger came, hot and brief, then receded like a wave. In its wake stood something quieter and far more enduring: resolve. If they saw a man too old to manage a thermostat, they were going to meet the man who framed this roof and read every line of every contract. I said Ellen's name out loud to test my voice and to see whether I could still ask her for help. "Sweetheart," I whispered to the photograph. "I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner." The air seemed to settle around me. I pulled a chair to the window where she loved to read and watched the street go blue with evening. Neighbors walked dogs. A boy on a scooter traced a bright loop on the sidewalk. The world kept moving as if nothing had broken. Inside me, something had finally snapped into place. They thought they could make a plan about my life without me. I would make a plan about my life that didn't include them. I went to the bedroom and opened the top drawer of the cherry dresser Ellen polished every spring until the wood looked like a deep red lake. The lemon oil lifted as if memory had a scent. Under her scarves lay the thick envelope where we kept our marriage license and the deed, folded along the same creases from years of checking and putting it back. My name, Ellen's and then mine alone after she died. The transfer recorded, notarized, witnessed in the clean strokes of a courthouse clerk. I carried the papers to the bed, sat on her side, and let the weight of that ink steady my shaking. She had warned me gently more than once. Don't give so much that she forgets to be grateful. I had waved it off because fathers wave off what they don't want to see, and because Ellen's faith in people usually outlived their failures. I looked up at her reading lamp for forever tilted since the night Lisa, feverish at 8, reached for water and knocked it askew. Some things we chose not to set straight. I spoke into the room the way you do when you hope a wall can carry your words to someone you love. I will not be warehoused, I said. I will not be treated like a line item. I will protect what we built. I slid the deed back into its sleeve and opened the file box at the foot of the closet. Tax returns, receipts. A breakdown of the tuition payments semester by semester with Ellen's tidy notes in the margins. Spring book list, already bought used. Lab fee waived after petition. There was a maintenance log on the house that would have made an inspector proud. Furnace filters changed bi-monthly. Roof inspected after the hailstorm of 2016. Water heater replaced for $1,100 with parts and labor. Reading those pages was like tracing the lines of our life with my finger. It made the picture clearer. This wasn't a museum of memories, it was a fortress of facts. If they forced a conversation, I would bring more than feelings. I would bring paper. The room gathered around me, and I understood the house wasn't asking me to stay, it was asking me to stand. I carried the file box to the small office and stacked the papers, then opened the shallow drawer where I keep the odds. Spare keys, the fountain pen Ellen gave me on our 30th, and a business card I tucked away after her doctor told us to set our affairs in order. Todd Fisher, attorney at law, estates and real property. I ran a thumb over the raised letters until the heat in my chest cooled. A man can spend a lifetime learning to swing a hammer. Wisdom is knowing when to set it down and pick up a phone. I cracked the window and let the evening air rinse the room. "Help me do this right, Elle," I whispered. Down the hall, the grandfather clock ticked. I squared the documents, slid the deed on top, and laid the card beside it like a bookmark for mourning. Before I killed the light, I wrote the date on a legal pad, and under it, 3 words, "Call the lawyer." The line I drew beneath them was dark, the kind a man can follow in light without losing his place. The morning after the call, I set the deed, tax returns, and Ellen's fountain pen on the kitchen table and brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon. The house felt watchful, as if the joists themselves were waiting to hear what I would do next. I touched the silver frame on the mantel, the photograph of Ellen in sunlight, and said, "I'm on it, Elle." Then I dialed the number on the card we'd saved for hard days. "Fisher and Associates," the receptionist said. "Todd Fisher, please. Roy Hayes. It's about real property." A short hold, then his voice, steady as a level bubble. "Roy, I remember you and Ellen. How can I help?" I told him that my daughter Lisa forgot to hang up, my son-in-law Mark kept talking, and together they sketched a plan to put me in a facility and sell the house for around $890,000. He didn't rush me. When I finished, I set the deed on my palm as if to prove to myself I still held it. On Colfax, his office smelled like paper and clean coffee. Todd greeted me with a firm handshake, and a legal pad turned to a fresh page. I slid the original deed across the desk, then the binder Ellen and I kept. Maintenance logs, permits for the electrical panel in 2015, the roof inspection after the 2016 hailstorm, and a folder of photos from studs to finish. He studied them as a carpenter studies a string line, then met my eyes. "Roy, the house is yours. Free and clear. Your daughter and her husband have no present claim. They can't sell it, they can't pledge it, and they can't force you out." "What about guardianship?" I asked. "Could they claim I'm unfit and take control?" He leaned back, a man who had said this too many times. "Colorado requires medical evidence, a pattern of unsafe behavior, and a judge's finding. A burnt coffee pot won't cut it. If you want belt and suspenders, we can execute a durable financial power of attorney and a medical directive naming someone you trust, not them. But as we sit here today, you hold the reins." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been rationing. He outlined a defensive plan. Keep the deed accessible, gather records, sign nothing a relative brings, and call him if anyone appears with a clipboard. Then he turned to offense. "If you choose to sell, Now's a good window. Inventory is tight, cash buyers are active, and your kind of craftsmanship draws premiums." The word premiums made me smile. Ellen had always said straight lines pay you back. Back home, I dialed the bank and asked for private client services. We set an appointment for Friday morning to open a high-balance checking account and a money market fund, establish wire instructions, and enroll in two-factor authentication. When the representative asked about the deposit amount, I said, approximately $895 less closing costs, and listened to her click notes that sounded like preparation, not curiosity. Then I called Lisa. My voice found the tone fathers use when their child is wobbling on a bike. Patient, warm, firm. "Hi, hon. You two doing all right in Phoenix?" She brightened. "Dad, we're great. Busy. Did you eat? Are you taking your vitamins?" I told her about the neighbor's peonies opening and the cardinal bossing the feeder. She suggested a place with on-site nurses and a golf cart shuttle, and I thanked her the way you thank a waiter who refills a glass you didn't want refilled. We hung up with manufactured cheer hung between us like a banner hiding scaffolding. The second call arrived an hour later with heat in it. "Dad," Lisa began, voice clipped, "Mark and I talked. Living alone at your age is risky. If you won't consider assisted living, we may need to call for a welfare check. They can evaluate you and make recommendations." Behind her, Mark spoke just loudly enough to cross from background to stage. "Once he's out, we can take care of the house properly." The words landed like cold nails in green wood. Welfare check, evaluate, recommendations. They had dressed in safety vests. Old fear tried to rise. The foreman in me told it to take a number. "I appreciate your worry," I said, choosing each word like a cut I would not redo. "I have appointments. We'll talk when you're back." "Dad, don't be stubborn," Lisa said. "We can't run over every time you forget a burner." "I didn't ask you to," I replied, letting quiet carry more weight than argument. Mark added, "If you won't cooperate, other people will make decisions for you." I ended the call. The silence after was clean, like air after lightning. I opened my laptop and searched for a real estate agent who moved like a carpenter, efficient, exacting, allergic to drama. The same name surfaced across reviews: Brian Connolly, boutique brokerage, average close in 14 days, known for quiet discretion. His profile showed steady eyes, not a salesman's grin. I dialed. "Connolly Properties." "Mr. Connolly, this is Roy Hayes. I may sell a 3-bedroom in Cherry Creek, oak floors, custom millwork, original owner, clear title. I built most of it myself. Timeline matters." He didn't gush. "Condition? Meticulous? Major systems? Panel 2015, roof inspected 2016, water heater 1100 last year. Price? Comps suggest 850 to 900. He said, "I can be there at 3. The hours before 3, I spent walking the house as if I were shaking hands with each room before goodbye. I wiped counters with lemon oil, ran a soft cloth along the banister Ellen used to steady herself when chemo made her woozy, and opened windows to let a cross breeze sweeten the air. I stacked permits, receipts, and the maintenance log on the dining table where Sunday roasts cooled for years. At 2:58, a silver sedan eased to the curb. Brian stepped out with a leather portfolio and a tape measure clipped to his belt. He didn't sell me on himself. He inspected the house. In the living room, he lifted his eyes to the crown molding and said, almost to himself, "Notched clean," then checked the returns. In the kitchen, he traced the bullnose edge of the granite and tested a cabinet hinge. Original windows? Reglazed and weather-stripped in 2018. HVS? Serviced twice a year. Invoices in the binder. We moved like two men checking a structure we both wanted to stand. On the deck, he paused at the maple Ellen planted and watched the light dapple the boards we stained one July when money was tight and time was cheaper than hiring help. Back at the table, he showed me comps on his tablet. "We're in rare air, Mr. Hayes. Demand is high, supply is low. If you're willing to price at $895 and accommodate a quick inspection limited to major systems, I can have a cash offer inside 24 hours, 10 business days to close, seller possession for $30, after if needed. The number felt like a door swinging on oiled hinges. $895, I said, tasting the fairness, with me choosing the title company and limiting repairs to safety issues. He nodded, printed a preliminary agreement from a portable printer, and flagged signatures with tidy arrows. I signed with Ellen's pen. He said, "I'll circulate this today." A text from Lisa bloomed with cheerful pixels. "Love you, Dad. Drink water. We'll talk plans when we're back. Mark says hi." I typed and deleted and settled for, "Love you too." It is a peculiar thing to be courteous to someone sharpening a knife. It is also a choice that keeps your hands clean. I drove to the bank branch that stays open late on Thursdays. A young banker led me into a glass-walled office and clicked through screens. We opened a premium checking account with no wire limits, a money market for idle funds, and online access with multi-factor authentication. "Once proceeds hit," he said, "we can split them between liquid and conservative instruments. We'll set alerts for any activity over your thresholds." I signed the forms and stored the new account numbers in the same folder as the deed. Back home, I ate a sandwich over the sink because I didn't want to wash a plate I wouldn't own much longer. I took Ellen's photo down and set it beside the legal pad. "We're moving, Elle," I said, my voice light for the first time in months. I sharpened a pencil and made 3 columns: protect, prepare, proceed. Under protect I wrote, deed, attorney, accounts. Under prepare, small storage unit for keepsakes, apartment search, insurance agent to bridge coverage. Under proceed, sign offer, schedule inspection, wire setup. At 8:20 the next morning, Brian's email arrived. Cash offer, $895,000, 10 business days, limited inspection, seller possession, 30 days. The PDF lay there like a brass key on a white cloth. I printed it and smoothed it flat with the side of my hand, a habit from decades of keeping blueprints neat. Then I called Todd. "Read it to me," he said. He grunted approval at the important parts and made quick notes on the others. "Send me the file. I'll turn it back inside an hour. And Roy, don't speak to anyone about this except me and your agent." Grief still lived where it wanted, but it had retreated to a background river. I thought of Lisa at 4, asleep on Ellen's shoulder during thunderstorms, and of Mark last summer on my patio telling a neighbor he felt lucky to have married into resources. I let those memories pass like weather. You don't argue with weather, you build around it. Todd's marked version came back with green checks. I signed the offer with Ellen's pen, then scanned and returned it before my resolve could cool. One thing remained, and I did it for me. I called Lisa. "Hey, kiddo," I said when she answered. "Just wanted to hear your voice." She sounded cheerful. "Dad, we were looking at a resort with on-site nurses. Mark says you should pack light, just essentials." I pictured the photo albums Ellen arranged by season and year, the quilt she made by hand, the maple shading the deck. Essentials. "We'll talk when you're back," I said, and let the pause stretch long enough to be noticed. That night I slept the way a carpenter sleeps when the framing is plumb and the sheathing is on. Morning washed the oak floors in honey. I packed a tote with the offer, my ID, and the wire instructions, then set Ellen's picture where it could watch the door. At the bank, a woman with short gray hair enrolled me in security I hadn't known existed. "My daddy used to say fences are for honest people," she said, sliding over a keypad. "Locks are for everyone else." We tested alerts, set transfer limits, and printed the routing number big enough for my eyes at night. By afternoon, the inspection was scheduled, the title company booked, and Todd's edits filed. I gathered everything into the manila folder I'd been using since the day Ellen and I applied for our first mortgage. I stood in the dining room and placed the folder dead center on the table under the lamp. Paper had become structure. Structure had become protection. Outside, the maple let loose a handful of leaves as if it, too, understood about letting go. I walked room to room, shutting windows, straightening a frame, smoothing a bedspread. I paused in the doorway of the room Lisa once painted lemon yellow and touched the pencil ladder on the jamb. 9, 10, 11, 14. Then white space where measuring stopped. "I loved you enough to keep this," I said into the quiet, "and I love myself enough to keep going." Down the hall, the grandfather clock ticked. I turned off lights and left the legal pad open to one clean line. Tomorrow, inspection, title, bank. Before bed, my phone buzzed twice. Brian confirmed the inspector for 9 a.m. and wrote, "Buyer enthusiastic. Expect formal acceptance in the morning." Todd sent a shorter note. Everything in order. Sleep. I set the landline and my cell on the charger and packed a small canvas bag in case I needed to move fast. Ellen's pen, the folder, my wallet, spare glasses, and a key to a storage unit I'd reserved for the photo albums. I walked the hall once more, touched the pencil marks on the jamb, and listened to the house settle. At the table I wrote a line under tomorrow's list. "They think I'm stalled. I'm moving." Then I turned out the lights, stood in the doorway to breathe in lemon oil and oak, and said into the dark, "They don't know what I know now." The offer landed before breakfast, a clean PDF with Brian's subject line written like a carpenter's promise. Cash offer, $895,000, 10 business days, limited inspection, seller possession. 30 days. I printed it, squared the corners against the dining table Ellen loved, and watched the lamp throw a warm circle over oak boards I'd laid a quarter-century ago. The number sat there steady as a plumb bob. I ran my thumb across the paper, the way you check a bead of caulk for gaps, and dialed Todd. He answered on the second ring, voice calm as a level bubble. "Roy, c'est bien." I told him I had an accepted cash offer with a quick close, an inspection limited to major systems, and 30 days possession after closing for the seller. "Good," he said. "Send me the purchase contract and the addenda. I'll mark what needs marking, but your terms sound tight." I signed with Ellen's fountain pen, the one she gave me on our 30th, and the blue ink dried to the color of a navy blazer. When I hit send, a soft quiet fell through the house, the kind of quiet that settles after a beam seats perfectly on its posts. I poured coffee, burned my tongue, and laughed at myself for the first time in weeks. An hour later, Brian texted a thumbs up and a single word: accepted. The clock in the hall answered with its even tick, and I moved room to room gathering the few things the buyers hadn't purchased with the property. Our wedding photo in the silver frame, Ellen's recipe tin with penciled notes on butter and patience, the quilt she stitched by hand, the winter the furnace coughed its last. Everything else would stay, the dining table that had held 1,000 meals, the reading chair by the bay window, the bookcases I'd built into the living room wall. I could have insisted. I didn't. Let strangers inherit the weight of our days. I was taking the heart of it with me. At the bank, a woman named Doris ushered me into a glass office and shut the door with a soft click that meant I would be heard. She had steel gray hair and gentle hands. "We'll do this carefully," she said, laying out the forms. We opened a premium checking account for the proceeds and a money market for the bulk. She built a small CD ladder at 3, 6, and 12 months because I told her I sleep better when interest works while I'm not looking. We set alerts on transfers and withdrawals, high and low, so my phone would chirp like a nervous bird if anything stirred. "Two-factor authentication," she said, handing me a little fob that blinked numbers like a tiny lighthouse. "Keep it with your wallet. If anyone calls asking for these codes, hang up and call me." I signed until my hand cramped, then flexed my fingers and signed some more. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I left with a folder that felt lighter than it should, the way a parachute feels lighter than a life. On Colfax, I rented a 5x10 storage unit, month to month, no questions, and carried in 3 boxes, albums Ellen arranged by season, the quilt she made from shirts that no longer fit me, and our wedding photo. I set the photo at eye level and told her, "Temporary." A young man in a Broncos cap rolled by with a dolly and nodded like he'd seen 1,000 lives pause here before moving on. Back at the house, I sat in the driveway while the engine ticked cool. Brian pulled up behind me with a clipboard and a neat stack of forms. "Inspector at 9, he said. "Title package in your email by noon." His tie was straight and his shoes were clean. He didn't try to fill the air with words. We shook hands the way men do when the work itself is the talk. The inspector came on time, slim and quiet, with a flashlight and a good nose. He checked the panel, modern and labeled, the roof, sound after the 2016 hail repair, the water heater, new and still warm around the collar, and the furnace, serviced last month, filters dated in my handwriting. He recommended a carbon monoxide detector in the upstairs hall, and one bolt tightened on the back porch handrail. I fixed both before lunch while he wrote his report at the dining table. We initialed a limited repair addendum that said, "As is beyond safety." Brian filed the papers before his coffee cooled, and by mid-afternoon the title company sent a welcome packet that sounded like a lullaby to men who like details. "Here is where we meet, here is what you bring, here is the order of signatures, here is where the wire goes." I signed a lease that evening on a modest apartment a few miles away. The building had elevators that didn't rattle and a front desk where they knew names. A community room held a jigsaw puzzle always half done, and a bulletin board listed things that survive even after houses change hands. Chair yoga at 10, bingo at 7, pancakes on Saturday if you bring your own syrup. Mrs. Chen, the manager, wrote the lease with the neatness of someone raised to believe in tidy corners. "Month to month," she said. "You'll like the view of the cottonwoods." "No." I paid the deposit and first month from my old account so the new one could stay clean, and we walked the unit together while she pointed out light switches as if enunciating a new alphabet. On the 8th day, I sat at the title office with Brian and a notary, in a long room paneled in the kind of wood that aims to calm. A bowl of peppermints guarded the pens. The closer had a warm laugh and a stack of highlighted pages. The settlement statement marched my name down line after line, then cut to the total. She slid a final page toward me the way a dealer slides a last card. "This is the wire instruction, Mr. Hayes. Confirm the last 4 on the receiving account." I read them aloud and signed. She lifted the paper with a small flourish. "Congratulations," she said. "Recording in 3 hours. Funds by end of day." Brian shook my hand and said he'd be by tomorrow to hand me a copy package and shake again. When we walked into the bright parking lot, I felt the peculiar peace a man feels the moment a storm line passes and the air goes clear. I drove to the apartment with the radio off so I could hear my own thoughts. They were quieter than I expected, like children who have finally fallen asleep after a long day. I set Ellen's photo on the nightstand and the recipe tin on the kitchen counter. I brewed coffee on a stove that didn't yet know me and carried the mug to a small balcony that looked over cottonwoods already rustling with the promise of evening. I called Doris. "Give me the good news," she chuckled. "Mr. Hayes, I was just about to call you. The wire landed and cleared the fraud checks. I placed $725,000 in your money market and $150,000 in checking. The CD ladder will settle overnight. I'll email statements." I thanked her for being our fence before we needed one. "My daddy said fences are for honest people," she replied. "Locks are for everyone else." John, that afternoon, I drove back to the house to do the one thing I had not yet done. I stood on the porch and called a locksmith named Eddie. He arrived in a van that had seen use, but not neglect. He was compact, 50-ish, with the patient manner of men who have learned that screws yield faster to steady torque than to cursing. He studied the brass deadbolts Ellen chose because they matched the knocker shaped like a lion's head. "You installed these?" he said. 15 years ago." He nodded like a mechanic hearing a clean engine. "Nice work." I shrugged. They've earned their keep." He set to work with neat hands. The new deadbolts clicked with a precise sound, not loud but certain, like a decision. He handed me 3 keys on a ring. "Try them," he said. They turned smooth as a well-oiled hinge. I paid cash. He gave a small salute and drove away. I pocketed the keys and thought, not for the first time, that sometimes protection sounds like a soft click. When I got back to the apartment, the mailroom held a thick manila envelope with my name typed cleanly and no return address. I set it on the small dining table and looked at it the way you look at a dog you suspect might bite. I slid it open with Ellen's pen. Inside lay a photocopy of a court form and a printed email thread. The caption on the form read like a brick through glass, "Petition for appointment of guardian and conservator." Petitioner, Mark Dalton. Proposed ward, Roy Hayes. Reason, incapable of managing property and personal decisions. It cited forgetting household appliances, unsafe living conditions, and financial confusion, and attached printed emails between Mark and a lawyer whose signature block bragged about elder law. A second attachment was a printout of a broker's comparative market analysis putting my house between $8,000 and $80,000 and $9,000-$10,000, circling the higher number in blue ink. The email thread had dates from the week before they flew to Phoenix. "If we can show incapacity," one line read, "an emergency hearing is possible. Conservatorship would allow prompt disposition of real property to secure suitable care." Prompt disposition, suitable care. I sat very still, the way you sit when a wild animal steps into your yard and looks straight at you. I called Todd and read the captions. He listened, then said, "I'm glad you sold first." He had me read the headings and the signature block. "This looks like a draft," he said. "If they had filed, you'd have been served. But drafts are enough for us to see their intent. Forward everything. I'll send a letter to the attorney whose name appears here. It will state that any petition will be met with a written objection, a request for an independent medical evaluation, a motion for costs and fees, and a motion to sanction for any misrepresentations. We will also note, for the record, that you have recently completed a significant real estate transaction with fully executed disclosures, limited inspection, title insurance, notarized signatures, and a clear wire trail. That is not the behavior of a confused man." He paused. "They wanted the house to be the centerpiece of their petition. Now it's gone." I could hear papers sliding into an envelope on his end, the sound of a man building a fence around a yard he intends to keep. "Todd," I said, "they meant to march me in front of a judge." "They meant to try," he said, "and you beat them to the door." I washed the pen and wrote a letter of my own on lined paper, slow and careful, the way you write when you mean for ink to do what your hands no longer care to do. I folded it into an envelope, wrote Lisa and Mark's names on the front, and put it in my pocket with a roll of painter's tape. Then I unboxed a device I'd ordered 2 nights earlier, a small camera that looks exactly like a phone charger, and tested the angle on my phone. The picture came through crisp as a winter morning. I drove to the house after dark, used my new key, and slid the charger into the outlet by the front door where it could see the entry. The camera's app drew a little white frame over the door and told me it would record on motion. I taped the envelope at eye level, straight and centered, where Mr. Rogers himself would have approved the placement. I locked the door and checked the feed from my phone in the driveway. The hall lay in quiet light. Back at the apartment, I made scrambled eggs and toast with too much butter. I ate standing at the counter because chairs felt like ceremony, and I had already had my fill of ceremony that day. I washed the pan, dried it, and put it away. The phone lay face down on the table, screen silent, camera sending nothing because nothing moved. I slept that night the way a carpenter sleeps when the sheathing is on and the forecast says clear. The next morning, the title company called to say the deed had recorded and the buyers now held title. "Balanced to the penny," the closer said, and something childish and proud in me smiled at that phrase. I went down to the community room and sat with the half-finished jigsaw puzzle. A woman with purple reading glasses asked if I preferred coffee or tea and whether I liked conversation. Sometimes, I said, and in that order. She smiled and put a corner piece in place with a little noise of triumph. Small victories matter. Late that afternoon, as the light went gold along the rooflines, my phone pinged with a motion alert. Their SUV eased up to the curb with the tired confidence of people returning to a place they thought was theirs. I opened the camera app. Lisa stepped out first, travel flats, silk blouse, hair pulled back, as if she were arriving to make kind arrangements for someone else's life. Mark slid out on the driver's side, checked his watch, and opened the hatch for their luggage. They moved with purpose toward the door. Lisa fished in her purse and brought out the key ring she'd stopped using months ago because the lock never needed her to open it. She put the key in, turned, and met a sound and feel she did not recognize. She tried again. It met her with the same indifferent precision. She looked at Mark. He went to the back, tried the garage side door, then circled around to the kitchen window. He vanished from the camera's frame. A moment later, the front door opened from the inside. They stepped into the hall, into the camera's eye, into the rest of their lives. They saw the envelope immediately. Lisa took it down with both hands as if paper were heavy. She read fast, then slower, then stopped. Her shoulders sagged as if a wire had been cut. Mark read over her shoulder, his jaw tightening through each line. You could see the math and the story warring in his face. Funds already moved, deed recorded, locks changed, storage unit address provided for their belongings, attorney name and number for all further communication, a single sentence in my handwriting that said, "I heard your conversation, I understand your plan, and I have chosen my own." The letter closed with a line I wrote for myself, but let them borrow. I built this home board by board. I will not be warehoused like a box of books. What did you expect? Mark snapped, stepping back as if the paper might bite. You pushed too hard. Lisa's head came up as if pulled by a string. You said a welfare check. You said a judge could sign something fast. You said... I said maybe, he hissed, face flushed. You were supposed to keep him sweet. The camera microphone caught the precise instant decency left the room. Lisa stared at the envelope, then at the empty spaces where our furniture had been. He sold it, she said, and turned the word over like a shard of glass. He sold it. Mark thumbed his phone as if a lawyer might live inside and leap out in a suit. We can challenge capacity, he muttered. We can say undue influence. He looked around as if searching for the ghost of a notary to argue with. Lisa rubbed her eyes the way she used to when she was a child who knew she'd crossed a line and hoped the world would blur before anyone noticed. Todd, she whispered, and the name sat between them like a fact neither wanted to face. She knew I kept records. She knew I counted bolts and receipts with the same care I once counted birthday candles. They began to argue in the small space where echoes have nowhere to go. You should have handled him, Mark said. You should have kept him compliant. The word compliant rang off the hardwood. Lisa's hand shook. He's my father. Even she did not sound convinced. Mark stabbed a finger at the letter. Storage on Colfax, he read. 30 days before fees. He's boxed us up like leftovers. He dropped to the floor and opened the hall cabinet as if the past might still sit on the shelf next to the light bulbs. It didn't. Call him, he barked. She dialed. My phone lit with her name. I let it ring. The sound of it in my apartment was nothing like the sound of it in my chest 6 nights earlier when I heard them decide where to put me. She tried again. I let it ring again and then stop. Mark's tone changed the way a salesman's tone changes when he knows the deal is gone, but his muscles won't admit it. We'll file that petition, he said. Emergency hearing. He's vulnerable. The word hung in the air like a lie told to a mirror. Lisa leaned against the wall and read the last line of my letter aloud, a line I wrote for clarity, not sting. Please direct all future communication through counsel. She said the words the way you read the rules in a museum you had hoped would be a playground. Then, softer, she said, We don't have a house. She said it again because sometimes a fact needs rehearsal before it becomes real. We don't have a house. She set the envelope down on the hall table as if to make a place for grief that hadn't arrived yet. I watched until I had seen what I came to see. Realization, not spectacle. Consequence, not cruelty. I pressed the side button and let the screen go dark. I carried my mug to the sink and ran the tap until the water turned cold. The man in the mirror looked older than last year and younger than last week. "They thought you were weak," I told him. "Turns out you were patient." The apartment hummed with the quiet of new walls. I dried the mug and set it alone in the cabinet. Everything here would match someday. For now, survival wore whatever clothes it needed. Todd called the next morning. "Their lawyer received my letter," he said. I laid out the facts in short declarative sentences. "You closed on an arm's-length cash sale for $895,000. You executed documents in front of a notary. You opened accounts with fraud protections. Any guardianship petition will be met by an objection and a request for fees." I also reminded him that a petition filed in bad faith can lead to sanctions. He cleared his throat. "I did not mention the camera. We don't need it. We have the law." I thanked him and told him about the envelope and the draft petition. He said, "Keep those. Date them. Photograph the postmark. If this gets noisy, a judge will appreciate a timeline." Doris rang next to say the CD ladder had settled and she'd placed a small transfer into a separate high-yield savings account for emergencies. "Think of it as a toolbox you don't open unless something breaks," she said. "And Mr. Hayes, I'm proud of you. You made a plan and stuck to it." I told her fences and locks, and she laughed. "Exactly." Late afternoon brought one more ping from the camera. They were back, moving more slowly, as if gravity had changed on our street. Lisa's shoulders rounded, like she was bracing for a storm. Mark carried 2 flattened cardboard boxes under his arm, the international symbol for "we're moving whether we like it or not." They opened the hall closet and began to take things down, careful with none of it. I watched 5 minutes, the time it takes to make or ruin a sandwich, and then closed the app. I did not need to watch them pack. I had already done the hard part. I had packed 30 years into a decision and moved out of a story that no longer wanted me. That evening the cottonwoods went black against a pink sky, and geese wrote their opinions overhead. I made soup from a can and ate it with crackers and called it dinner. I put Ellen's photo on the kitchen counter so she could look out at the trees the way she liked. "Locks are changed," I told her. "Funds are safe. Paper is filed. If there's weather after this, it will have to invent itself." I slept light and woke once to the creak of the building settling, then slept again until morning carried coffee into the room. By mid-morning, the title company emailed a final recording receipt, a PDF with my name in black and the buyer's name below it. Legal descriptions can sound like poetry if you read them slowly. Beginning at a point 116 feet east of the northwest corner, thence south. I closed the file and sat with the extraordinary ordinariness of a life changed by signatures and wires. Then I walked to the community room and slid a piece of sky into the puzzle. A man with a veteran's cap said, "You building something?" "Always," I said, and he grinned like he knew exactly what I meant. The day after that, a certified letter arrived at my apartment for Lisa and Mark from Todd's office. Care of me, because their mailing address still ran through my house by habit, more than design. I texted Todd a photo of the envelope and hand-delivered it to the mailbox at the old place so it could meet them with the dignity of registered ink. The camera saw them sign for it and carry it inside like a weight. I did not watch them read. I already knew the words. No further contact with Mr. Hayes except through counsel. Withdrawal of any draft guardianship contemplated. Notice that defamatory statements about capacity would be pursued. Demand that any property belonging to you located at the residence be removed within 30 days or it would be disposed of in accordance with the leaseback terms and the buyer's convenience. Firm, plain, true. Near sunset, the camera caught something I did not expect. Lisa stood in the hall alone with the envelope and my letter side by side. She put a hand on the wall where Ellen used to tap when thunder rolled across the plains. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just looked smaller, like a person who finally understands what she has traded and can't buy it back. Mark came up behind her and said something I could not hear. She folded my letter and slid it into her purse. Then they turned out the hall light and left. I set my phone down and listened to the apartment breathe. I thought about the way life can sound like a workshop on a Saturday when the radio is low and the windows are open and you're cutting true. I stood at the sink and rinsed a cup and set it in the rack. Outside, a neighbor laughed at something I couldn't hear. A dog shook its collar. The cottonwoods whispered the same whisper trees have made in this valley since before houses were ever counted. I wrote one line on a legal pad and left it on the table for the morning. Tomorrow, close the storage unit, call insurance, and buy a new coffee pot. Then I added another line, not a task, but a truth. They thought I would fold. Instead, I finished the job. When they finally came back, it was late afternoon. The sun was dropping low, painting the neighborhood in that honeyed light that makes every shadow long and sharp. I had been expecting them all day, the way you wait for a storm you know is coming. Not with fear, but with a steady readiness. I was in my new apartment across town, feet up, a glass of Cabernet in my hand, the laptop open so I could watch the live feed from the tiny camera I'd hidden in the living room. The place looked the same, but it wasn't theirs anymore. Not legally, not financially, not in any way that mattered. Mark's truck pulled up first, the engine rumbling before cutting off. Then Lisa's SUV slid into the driveway behind it. I could see their movements from the feed, the way they came up the front steps side by side, talking fast. Lisa had her phone in her hand, scrolling, maybe checking messages, maybe texting some friend to complain about me. Mark was carrying a bag of groceries, the kind of casual detail that almost made them look like any married couple coming home. But I knew better. They weren't coming home. They were walking into a place they no longer controlled. Mark reached for his keys. I leaned forward, my wine glass pausing halfway to my lips. I'd changed the locks 3 days ago. The key slid in, turned, and stopped cold. He frowned, tried again, jiggled it like that might change the reality. Lisa tried hers. Same result. They looked at each other, confusion giving way to the first flicker of unease. Mark tried harder, shoulders stiffening. Then he knocked, sharply, as if I might magically appear to let them in. Of course, I didn't. A few seconds passed before Lisa noticed the white envelope taped neatly to the door, right where they couldn't miss it. I'd written their names in big, clear block letters. Mark and Lisa. She pulled it free and tore it open without waiting. My letter wasn't long. I let her. It didn't need to be. Just a simple, formal notice. Effective immediately, the property at address is no longer your residence. All rights of access have been revoked. Any attempt to enter without permission will be considered trespassing and reported to authorities. Your personal belongings have been packed and delivered to the storage unit listed below. Payment for the unit has been made for 30 days. After that, responsibility for storage and retrieval is yours alone. I'd signed it in full. No initials, no ambiguity. Lisa read the first few lines aloud, her voice catching halfway through. She stopped, her eyes widening. "What is this?" she demanded, looking at Mark as if he might have an answer. Mark took the letter from her hands, scanned it quickly, and then crumpled it in his fist. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, his voice rising. "She can't do this." "She already did," I whispered to myself, watching them from the safety of distance. I raised my glass in a silent toast. They tried the door again, harder this time. The knob rattled under Mark's grip, the deadbolt holding firm. I could almost hear the sharp intake of his breath, the one people take when they realize they've lost control. Lisa stepped back, her hands fluttering near her face like she didn't know where to put them. "Call her," she said finally, her voice high and strained. "You call her," Mark snapped back. "This was your idea in the first place. You should have handled it better." That was when the real cracks began to show. Their argument spilled out right there on the porch, raw and unfiltered. Lisa's voice rose, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Handled it better? I told you to wait. I told you not to push her into signing anything before we had the paperwork ready. But no, you had to rush. You had to make it official. And you had to talk to that lawyer without telling me," Mark shot back, his face flushing. "Do you think I don't know you were trying to get your name on the deed without me? You're just as greedy as she is stubborn." It was like watching two actors forget the audience was still there. The politeness they wore in public was gone. In its place was the truth, selfishness, blame, and the sour taste of a plan that had fallen apart. I sat back in my chair, letting the scene wash over me. The afternoon sun caught the rim of my glass, sending a thin red glow across my hand. For the first time in months, I felt light. Not giddy, not wild, but quietly, deeply satisfied. Lisa's tears turned into sobs, the kind that shook her shoulders. Mark looked away from her, staring at the street like maybe he could will himself somewhere else. Eventually, they both fell silent. They stood there, side by side, but not together, the gap between them wider than the space on that porch. I didn't call the police. I didn't need to. The letter, the locks, the legal documents, they were enough. My attorney had made sure of that. Within the week, the sale of the house would be final. The $895,000 offer had already cleared inspection, and the buyers were eager to close. The funds, every cent, were sitting safely in my new account, untouchable by anyone but me. When they finally left, it was without looking back. Lisa climbed into her SUV, still sniffling. Mark threw the grocery bag into the truck bed, the apples rolling inside with a hollow thud. They drove off in opposite directions. I closed the laptop, drained the last of my wine, and leaned back in my chair. The quiet of my apartment felt different that evening, not empty, but peaceful. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of a neighbor's dog barking 2 floors down, even the way the light pooled across my new oak floors. It all felt like mine, truly mine. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a rhythm I hadn't realized I'd been craving. Morning walks through the park down the block, coffee at the little cafe where the owner had already learned my name and how I take my latte. I furnished the apartment slowly, choosing pieces that made me smile rather than rushing to fill the space. A reading chair by the window, a small dining table with room for 2, though I had no plans to invite Mark or Lisa over. They tried to reach out once, a single voicemail from Lisa, her voice small and hesitant. "Dad, I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I deleted it without replying, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. The truth was simple. I didn't need the lead. Blood may tie you together, but it doesn't guarantee loyalty. And loyalty, once broken, is not easily rebuilt. Mark never called. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that they'd moved into a small rental outside of town. No more talk of investments or renovations. No more grand plans to modernize the house. They were keeping a low profile, which suited me just fine. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself wondering if they understood yet, if they'd realized that the real loss wasn't the house or the money. It was me, my trust, my presence in their lives. One evening, I sat on my balcony, the city lights twinkling in the distance, a cool breeze carrying the scent of lilacs from the park. I thought about all the years I'd spent putting their needs ahead of mine, paying their bills, helping with down payments, babysitting at the last minute so they could take weekend trips. I had done it all willingly, thinking it was what family meant. But family, I'd learned, is defined not by obligation, but by mutual respect. Without that, all you have is shared DNA and a history that can feel more like a weight than a bond. I lifted my glass again, this time not in triumph, but in quiet gratitude for my freedom, my choices, my life. "You thought I was weak," I murmured into the night air. But I was just patient. The lesson was clear, etched into me like stone. Self-respect is worth more than any inheritance you can pass down, and peace is the richest reward of all. Not long after, I signed up for a volunteer shift at the community center. Nothing big, just helping organize the weekly food drive, greeting people at the door. But it felt good, honest, like building something new on ground I had cleared myself. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. Life didn't become perfect overnight. There were still moments when a familiar song or the smell of apple pie would tug at memories I wasn't ready to face. But those moments passed, and in their place came others. New routines, new friends, new reasons to get up in the morning. The money sat in the bank, secure. I had plans for it, maybe travel, maybe a little cabin somewhere quiet. But there was no rush, for now it was enough to know it was mine. Earned, kept, and protected. Mark and Lisa faded from my daily thoughts. They were out there somewhere, perhaps still blaming each other, perhaps pretending none of it happened. That was their burden to carry, not mine. I had laid mine down. And as I watched the first fireflies flicker in the darkening park that evening, I felt the gentle certainty that this was only the beginning. It's been 3 months since I closed the door on that chapter of my life. 3 months since I walked away from the house, the drama, and the people who thought my loyalty was something they could twist into their own gain. In that time, I've built something far more valuable than a property or a bank account. I've built a life that feels like mine again. The mornings in my new apartment start quietly. Sunlight slips through the wide kitchen window, spilling across the small round table where I have my breakfast. I take my coffee black now, no sugar, no cream. I've grown to like the bite of it, the way it wakes me up and reminds me I'm in charge of my own choices. From here, I can see the park across the street. Even in winter, it's alive. Joggers in fleece jackets, kids chasing each other with red cheeks, an old couple holding hands like they've been doing it for 50 years. It's the kind of view I didn't know I needed until I had it. Most mornings, after I rinse my cup, I put on my coat and head down to the community center 2 blocks away. I signed up to volunteer twice a week, but I find myself stopping by almost every day. Sometimes I help organize the shelves in the food pantry. Other times, I'm just there to greet people as they walk in. There's a warmth in that place that has nothing to do with the heating system. Strangers become familiar faces. Names stick. And slowly, I've found myself part of something. Not because I'm related to anyone there, but because we choose to show up for each other. Last week, we had a pancake breakfast fundraiser. I stood behind the coffee urn for 2 hours, pouring cup after cup, listening to the chatter of families, the clatter of forks on plates. It struck me that I hadn't felt this kind of belonging in years, maybe decades. Not the forced, obligatory kind that comes with family gatherings where you're expected to play a role, but the easy kind where people appreciate you simply for being there. I haven't spoken to Lisa or Mark since that day on the porch. I didn't expect to, and I don't miss the sound of their voices. Still, news has a way of finding its way to you, whether you ask for it or not. A mutual acquaintance from church mentioned they'd moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. The rent is high for what it is, and they're both working extra hours to keep up. Their once perfect social media photos, the dinner parties, the vacations, the dream home updates, have vanished. In their place, nothing but silence. I'm told their relationship has been strained since losing the house. They argue more. Lisa spends weekends with her sister. Mark stays late at work. Whether they blame me, themselves, or each other doesn't matter. That's their life to untangle now. I no longer feel the need to solve their problems or even to know the details. 2 weeks ago, an envelope showed up in my mailbox with Lisa's handwriting on it. For a moment, I just stood there holding it, my thumb resting on the seal. Part of me wondered if I should toss it unopened. But curiosity, and I'll admit, a lingering sliver of compassion, won out. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. Dad, I don't know where to start. I'm sorry for how things turned out. I'm sorry for the things I said and the things I didn't say. We thought we were protecting our future, but we hurt you instead. I wish we could talk. I miss you. Lisa. I read it twice. The words were plain, the kind you could say to anyone after any kind of falling out. There was no acknowledgement of the depth of what they had done. No mention of the lies, the manipulation, the months of pretending everything was fine while they plotted behind my back. Maybe she wasn't ready to face it. Maybe she never would be. I folded the letter back up, slid it into the envelope, and placed it in the drawer where I keep old receipts and warranty cards. Not the trash, but not anywhere I'd be tempted to look at it again. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That night I sat by the window with a book and a cup of tea, the letter out of sight, but not entirely out of mind. There was a time when I would have called her back immediately, desperate to mend the rift, willing to bend myself into any shape necessary to keep the peace. But those days are gone. I've learned that some bridges are better left as memories. I'm not angry anymore, not in the way I was. The sharp edges of betrayal have worn smooth with time. What's left is something quieter, a steady recognition of where my boundaries are, and a commitment to keeping them. The apartment is small compared to the house I left, but it's just the right size for me. 2 bedrooms, one for sleeping, one I've turned into a reading and writing space. The desk by the window holds my father's old pocket watch, a stack of postcards from places I visited, and a small ceramic bowl I found at a flea market, filled with loose change and keys. These are my things, chosen and kept because they matter to me. On the wall hangs a framed photo of me and my late husband, taken on a summer afternoon 30 years ago. We're standing in front of a picnic table covered in fried chicken, potato salad, and watermelon, laughing at something that wasn't even caught on camera. It's a reminder that love and loyalty do exist, and that they come from people who show up for you without expecting a piece of your life in return. At the community center, I've started leading a small writing group for other seniors. We meet every Thursday afternoon in the sunlit room at the back, sharing stories about childhood, travel, and the odd lessons life has thrown our way. Last week, one woman read a poem about her garden, and another man told us about hitchhiking across the country in 1968. Listening to them, I realized how rich life can be when you fill it with voices that inspire you instead of drain you. Some evenings, I take a slow walk through the park, stopping at the bench by the pond. Ducks drift lazily on the water, and the lights from the nearby houses shimmer in the ripples. I sit there, hands in my pockets, breathing in the cool air, feeling no rush to be anywhere else. It's in these moments I know, without question, that I made the right choice. I don't need Lisa and Mark to understand that. I don't need their approval or their apology. I have my own approval now, my own peace. Family is not just blood, I say sometimes under my breath, as if speaking it aloud helps it settle deeper into my bones. It's respect, trust, and gratitude. And when I say it, I'm not thinking of the family I lost, but of the one I've found, the friends at the community center, the neighbor who brings me fresh muffins on Sundays, the young cashier at the market who always asks how my day is going. I've come to believe that life doesn't shrink when you let go of the wrong people. It expands. It makes room for the right ones. So I keep living the way I have been, waking up to sunlight on my kitchen table, walking to the park, laughing with new friends, and spending my evenings in the quiet comfort of knowing I am exactly where I'm meant to be. Every day is proof that I chose right. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.